Welcome everyone to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me as always is my co-host, Walt Schwenk. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How are you going?
I am going very well, Walt. Thank you for asking. I hope you are all doing well as well, listeners. Welcome back to Awesome Truth. We're talking about a book today. It's a book we've covered very recently in our last episode, actually, in sort of a preview capacity. We had Keith Elliot Greenberg, best friend of the show, on. If you haven't listened to that one, go listen to it. It's available everywhere. And we had a great conversation about his new book, Follow the Buzzards, Pro Wrestling in the Age of COVID-19. And Walt, we are back today. We've both finished the book, and we're back to talk about it in full. It's quite a read. It's really a wonderful chronicle of the last couple crazy years in the world and in pro wrestling.
Yeah, it was always great to talk to Keith and just to kind of give people a bit of a tease on what to expect. I mean, like, I said this a lot last episode, and I'll say it again, like, spoiler alert, we more or less are recapping the last 2 to 3 years of, like, pro wrestling and life events. So nothing should be a surprise, but after finishing the book, it was like it felt very much like you said, a diary, and Keith's diary. We said this off air, but I liked it, so I'm going to use it. Just like a chronicling and a diary of everything that Keith experienced, covering this story in real time with the people, with like firsthand accounting of all of these like big and small events where through his lens. And we endorsed it last time, and having finished it, I think I can double endorse it because it was a good read, and it was a very easy read. It was very interesting and fun, and also just like a nice reliving and remembering all of the things that have led us to kind of like today in wrestling in many ways.
It really, that is a great way to put it too, because for obviously a year there, almost on the nose, wrestling sort of kept going, and the big promotions were filming every week and putting out content, and the smaller promotions were trying to find ways to survive. But it was sort of like everyone, in a way, it felt like everyone hit pause, like it was all sort of hermetically sealed. So there were obviously stories going on, like people were bouncing from company to company, belts were changing hands, big matches and pay-per-views were happening, like things were still going on, but it sort of felt like we were just happy for the distraction, happy to have something to watch, something new, But at the same time, now that we're through it, and in a certain sense, and certainly back to something very much more normal, it's amazing how much the shockwaves are still sort of being felt, Like, it was, as we went into the COVID era, AEW was hot, and WWE was sort of floundering, and now we're here in 2022 as the year wraps up, and AEW is floundering, and WWE is hot, and a lot of what happened in these, in that year, Reigns turning heel, all of those guys jumping to AEW, many of them not working out for various reasons, like, all of that has sort of led us to where we are today. Like, they're both still printing money, so I don't think anybody's too sad about it, but it's just, the way we perceive them, the way they're sort of representing themselves in the marketplace, the way the companies are sort of positioned, like, it's amazing how much has sort of exploded from there. And as you said, Keith sort of chronicles it all, as everyone knows from either reading the book or listening to him talk. He editorializes, but he does the legwork too, and that's what I love about this book is Keith, he certainly shares his opinion on politics and otherwise, but then he also goes to shows all over the country and beyond, and talks to people and learns and listens and tells their stories. And like, I think that's the thing I like the most is like, he loves getting out there and having conversations and being amongst wrestling fans and wrestlers and telling their tales.
Yeah, and also just like his like internal monologue as he's experiencing certain things. Like there are certain indie events that happened in 2020 that he was invited to later in the year when it was like the GCW and the Indie Collective and the Josh Barnett shows and all of these indies kind of coming together to put together these shows and these outdoor events in Indianapolis or Texas or wherever. And he's like, yeah, part of me felt kind of weird going on a plane and like seeing this event because we didn't know what the hell was going on. And so,
but then he's like, but I also want to watch wrestling.
Well, of course. Yeah. you know, so you get that like sense of, it's editorial, but it's also just like personal, and it's very like real. It's like, this is Keith's job in many ways, and this is his passion. This is what he loves to do, but also like he felt bad doing it at times, or he felt uneasy. And it's like, I think we've all can relate to that. Just, I didn't go travel on a plane to go watch, Joey Janela's Spring Break or Effie's Big Gay Bash. But I did for a wedding or another big life event. So like, it's just funny to relive those emotions through Keith and his journey.
Yeah, and he's honest too. Like he doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't make himself sound safer or smarter or dumb. Like he just says, "This is what I did." Like we were all kind of figuring out what was smart and what we should do, and like I did this and I did that, and maybe it's dumb, maybe it's not. He's still here, thank God. But like he did what he wanted to do at the time, and he doesn't excuse himself, or make up stuff after the fact or justify it after the fact. He just says this is what happened, and like I appreciate that. Like he's a brutally honest man, and I love that. And like he's equally honest about his love of wrestling, and how he needs it, and how it, and one of the things that I really enjoyed the most is sort of as you get to the end of the book, he goes to WrestleMania 37. He gets a press pass to 37, and is concerned that everyone will think he's a mark for being backstage. And I was like, Keith, you worked for them before. Like, I think you're allowed to go backstage. But like he just tells it like it is, I was feeling this way at the time, and I'm gonna write it in a book, and here it is. And like I just think like I said, I love his journalistic sort of integrity and efforts to chronicle, and then I love that he just like sometimes he just tells you what he was thinking at the moment.
It's very approachable. It's very like inviting, as a reader to read him. I mean, we obviously both know him, so it's a little different, but at the same time, like that's the sense I get. If I didn't know him, I feel like I would. If I would meet him, like, and people I've introduced him to in my life say that, like, oh yeah, no, I can. His writing style kind of reflects that.
his real life talking and existing style.
Yeah. But I also recall in that same story of him being backstage at WrestleMania 37, I believe he said Bruce Pritchard gave him a smile that was both, "Hey, glad to see you," and "What the hell are you doing here?" Which doesn't surprise me, what I know of Bruce Pritchard and I know of Keith. It's like I could see why he would think that.
Yeah, I imagine Bruce gives a lot of people that look, or gives you looks where you can't tell if he's pissed at you or what. It seems like a very Bruce thing to do. But I just love the idea of Keith being backstage at Mania. Like just looking at everything. He's writing a book. Like he deserves to be there. I think he does. But yeah, I could see being a little I'd probably be a little self-conscious too.
Well, yeah, we know how you feel. Kevin Nash would feel about you.
Oh, he would not be my friend, of course. He would.
So I guess just don't run into Kevin Nash backstage.
No, I think Matt Cardona might be my friend, but I don't think Kevin Nash should be my friend.
As long as you like action figures, I think he would.
Like theme parks, he likes a bunch of nerdy shit. So
of course he does. Another thing that you hit on, switching gears back to the book and COVID and wrestling, that also kind of like I really enjoyed and appreciated is the fact that like a lot of biographies span over a lifetime. Obviously, it's a biography, and you read about certain books with regards to the Attitude Era, where it's you're seeing the ripple effects of the Attitude Era in a sense that Vince McMahon won and now controls wrestling, but like beyond that, it's not it's completely different now than it was 20, 25, 30 years ago. So like there's only so much that you can really like glean and take away from those historical tales other than this is history. Whereas, again, seeing and reliving all of these COVID events and then contextualizing it in today's like wrestling landscape. And it's so hard not to. And it's like, there's very few books out there or documentaries really that like really sit in a very recent moment of wrestling history and gives you that recap and ability to really be reflective, because I forgot so much of the stuff, and it's still so relevant to fans everywhere today.
Yeah, I forgot about, Kenny Omega winning the Impact belt. I forgot about Malachi debuting in AEW. I forgot, we've talked about Drew Mac's run, but I forgot, like, the a lot of the little things that happened throughout, like even Reigns turning heel. I didn't really remember how that went down. Like, feels like Reigns has been heel for like years and years now, and I guess it has been like year and change, but it has not been a lifetime. But it just it's become such a staple in wrestling, like bad guy Roman Reigns head of the table. But then I was like, oh yeah, that happened during all this, and like the reason it arguably happened was because of his time away from COVID. Someone finally talked him into it, or they finally decided to pull the trigger. Like, all that was lost from my memory. And like you said, all of it is super important, like good and bad. Like it got us all here, and like I said, it did to me at least. It really felt like nothing. It felt like when I was watching during COVID, it didn't feel as important. I don't know why. Like, it just felt like none of these things, like when the world went back to being regular again, we were going to sort of hit reset. And then they're like, no, that's not how this was. Like, wrestling trudged on in real ways, made real acquisitions, made real big storylines, like, and then got it sort of here. And reading all that, it does sort of make your head spin, going, holy shit, they did so much.
It's so weird though, because wrestling was more relevant back then because there wasn't sports. Mm-hmm. There's nothing. Like, even like reality shows that were in the middle of like filming all went on hiatus, and then eventually they would finish off and do whatever. But like, it was the only thing that was still new every week. So it's funny to say like, oh yeah, it's like you kind of mentally put it on pause, but at the same time, it's like, no, they plowed so far ahead and still yeah, maybe the quality is worse because no fans, and maybe they changed certain creative, but like they moved forward. They didn't move back. And so that's why I think it is a little surprising when you look. It's like, all this stuff happened, but like you don't really the memorable stuff you don't associate with COVID, but really you could look at a lot of the stuff. It's like, well, actually it is related and it is relevant and it is like, it was something. These were decisions that were made during this time that matter.
Yeah. And another thing that was really a big deal that Keith chronicles in depth that I had really also not thought about a ton tied to wrestling was Black Lives Matter and speaking out. Both things that really, ticked up in prominence during, the COVID era. And that wrestling, I would say, acquitted itself relatively well. Like, I don't think, at the very least, like, wrestling has obviously been, we've read books from the 60s, 70s, 80s, like, wrestling was a debauched, weird place, and still kind of is, but certainly was way, way more back in the day. Unhinged, a lot of weird characters, like, you could sort of get away with anything almost. And, in 2020 and 2021, they came for, the sexual abusers, and for, and racism became a thing that they started, talking about more, and black performers speaking out about, the just probably more, not necessarily treatment against them, but looking for equality, tying it back to larger movements in the world. And I think wrestling did a pretty good job, like, for an industry that is, still in a lot of ways catching up and reckoning with the fact that now it is incredibly mainstream and like a full-on business, and billions of dollars are being made, and like it's on TV, it's a staple of popular culture. I think wrestling did a pretty nice job, especially in reading Keith's recap, in weeding out the people who are really, really bad and trying to at least nominally, up front, outwardly embrace like the idea of progressive change, or at least the performers who want a voice are allowed to have a voice and should have a voice and share their thoughts with the world.
Yeah, I think that those were all good examples of movement in wrestling, and like I think that just kind of ties back into the form and the medium of wrestling just kept moving forward. It didn't stall. It didn't just like press pause. It didn't take steps back during this time. I think the biggest thing that really happened that took a step back is it was a harsh reality of like the business element of wrestling, where it wasn't safe from furloughs, it wasn't safe from like, job cutting and financial woes and all that. And I think so. Socially, yes, move forward. Financially, still all the big companies still made a lot of money with TV deals, but you still saw a lot of people lose their job, just like any other media company and any other business. And I think the results of that became pretty relevant. I mean, we're still seeing the relevance of that today as the Triple H is trying to buy back people and tip the favors back, all from decisions that were made, financial decisions that were made with performers 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest, if we're going to talk about, where we are right now in late 2022, tied back to this era, like reading about Malachi switching over and Andrade and then Miro before them and Buddy Murphy, like all these guys that at the time felt like it just really felt like, oh my god, like think about how AEW is going to use Malachi or how they're going to use Buddy or how they're going to use I mean one by one every time someone came over. Obviously Danielson a little bit of a different story, Punk a little bit of a different story, like pure main eventers, like of course, but all the mid card guys, I feel like there was a strong sense of, oh man, when they get their hooks in these guys, they're going to the moon. And look where we are now, like Andrade wants to leave so badly. Andrade's getting in fights. He wants to leave so badly. Malachi is gone and probably barred from going back to WWE for a little while. Buddy, I believe, is he might be gone too. Or at least he's certainly on the bench. Who knows? Even Miro, like all these guys, you just really thought were gonna. Adam Cole, they seemed like they could be game changers, and they weren't. And I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if that's an AEW's fault, if there was just maybe these guys sort of had reached their ceiling and Vince was right after all. Like I don't know, where do you think we stand given all those departures and how they've sort of shaken out?
I mean, I don't think it's genius to say that the tide is certainly turning back towards the monolith of WWE with regards to like performer preference potentially. I think another big change too is a lot of these guys switch companies and there was just less wrestling happening, so appearances meant more. And now you're seeing a lot of people just getting injured and they're on the sidelines. And like AEW, I think more than anyone is kind of like, and WWE too, like now that we're touring again and we're just doing more wrestling, it's like, oh wait, that's right, this is a thing that people get really hurt doing. And so like the last year, you've seen a lot of people on the sideline, and I think that has hurt momentum in many ways with both companies in various ways, in various forms. But I think with regards to AEW, I mean, that's a different conversation potentially, but ultimately I think the new people that they brought in, some of which they used pretty frequently, pretty early, and then there's only so many spots at the top, and I think that's a unique. That's not a unique situation, unfortunately, because a lot of them just came from that same situation at WWE.
Yeah, it's I hate to give Vince McMahon too much credit. He's already incredibly rich and has received bounds of credit in his career, many of that justified. But I will say, like, I do tip my cap to the WWE to a certain extent, because everyone thought, oh man, Tony Khan, he's given, he's putting the Bucks and Kenny and like Cody and giving them legitimate titles, legitimate jobs. He's letting people maybe not book themselves but involve themselves in the conversation. Like Moxley and Jericho clearly have a lot of input. MJF, I'm sure, has a ton of input, and Punk did. Like it seems like they all sort of were allowed to some extent contribute or control what their characters were going to do. And like it just seemed like, oh, this is going to be a golden era. Like they're going to work out all the kinks. This is going to be pure wrestling. And then you hear all these stories, and even you watch the shows, and you're like, it's pretty good. Like I still enjoy watching Dynamite. Like it's not bad, but it just never became what I think I don't even know we were sold a bill of goods. Maybe we were just being looking through rose-colored glasses, and thinking, well, this is going to be a utopia of wrestling. And you're like, well, no, it's sort of like WWE. It's less embarrassing than WWE. Like they make fools of themselves far less, but it's also just like a wrestling show. It's really just 2 hours of wrestling. If you like wrestling, you'll like AEW, and I don't think it's really gone beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, embarrassing is relative at this point because, I think it's less embarrassing in WWE these days. I mean, I don't think anyone is gonna laugh if I say that, but ultimately they still have 3 hours to fill, and there's a lot of shit they're still throwing at the wall. Whereas the opposite is true, where it's like the AEW doesn't have enough time to feature all these guys, and as a result, you know, people just get left behind. And you know, what's embarrassing is getting put on dark these days, I think, or getting relegated to like
Rampage, too much, like making Rampage appearances every week.
Right. It's like, lol. Oh, you have that nice Friday night spot. Like,
enjoy Tony Nese and Smart Mark Sterling.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, again, embarrassing is pretty relative. But there's still embarrassment on both sides.
There is. And yeah, and it's, you know, speaking of embarrassing, another thing that Keith mentions that I forgot about, WWE embarrassment, Raw Underground. Do you remember Raw Underground, Walt?
Yo. I mean, I get it, but
I mean, wow. it was nice to like stuff like that. I do. Both companies, again, going back to the book, they tried to be creative, you know, like they tried to do something different. Like WWE's different is always unique, but like Stadium Stampede, which we talked about with Keith on the last episode, like they were trying something. The cinematic matches, of course, like they were looking for anything, and I think that sort of experimentation and rolling with the punches is what was when WWE is usually pretty good. You know, when their backs are against the wall, they usually innovate pretty well. And Raw Underground notwithstanding, it was nice to be reminded, like like you said, they were throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks, but it wasn't just like, let's do a dumb storyline with these two guys. It was like, how can we present the show differently? How can we make our television, though we're filming, you know, with no fans or in front of TV screens or whatever, how can we try and give it life and make it sort of dynamic in a way that we just can't do? We can't just put on a regular wrestling show anymore.
Yeah, I think in the context, like at the time, it's like, this is embarrassing. One of the many things that they were doing that was embarrassing back then. But like, I think rereading it and recontextualizing it in like we really need to figure out a way to make the show different with no fans. It's like, I get it. I forgive them a little bit more in that instance. Even if it was like, it seemed like it was a bad idea that might have been in the works potentially before all this. And I think that's where like, the gray area for me is like, is this just a bad idea that they were going to do at some point anyway? Like, I wouldn't have surprised me if Raw Underground was a thing that happened in like 2019 either. And I think that's the part that like has me rethinking when I was rereading it. It's like, yeah, I forgive them for trying it, but like, there's also is a thing that they thought could have worked, like notwithstanding the circumstances. And it's like, I don't know which one is more right, but they both could be right.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it has Brawl for All energy. It has, you know, Vince loves bringing real fighting into wrestling every now and then on a cyclical basis, you know, and it definitely feels like.
They just did the Fighter's Pit or whatever match. Which
was just a match in like there was nothing real about that at all, right? It was just a dumb gimmick.
The only reality is that Daniel Cormier was there, and he is a legitimate fighter.
But he didn't do anything. He was just there.
It was like Dan Severn being the referee of the Hard Dungeon.
It was exactly like Dan Severn. It's over. Heart's your winner.
Yeah. God.
Dan Severn, great theme song.
Literally only 3 people in the world will understand what I'm referencing.
Of course, people listening to this podcast are absolutely aware that Dan Severn refereed the Hart Dungeon match between Ken Shamrock and Owen Hart. Is that right?
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
Well, it had to have a heart.
No, I know. I was just trying to remember exactly what it was. My memory's not as good as yours on that kind of stuff.
For better, for worse.
Also, I buried the Lee Wall. I can't believe we haven't talked about this yet. In the early state, in the first like third of this book, we find out that there was a wrestling book Zoom convention, and we were not invited. What the fuck?
I have my theories as to potentially why.
Yeah, if you haven't read it yet, Kenny Casanova, who has come up in a previous episode of the show and has written a lot of wrestling books and is a person we've interacted with to a certain extent, hosted a wrestling book author Zoom convention thing. Is that the best way to put it? I don't really know how to describe it.
It's like WrestleCon only with wrestling literature slant.
Yeah, and people went, like, wrestlers and authors went and talked about, like, the act of writing wrestling books. We're a wrestling book podcast. We are the wrestling book podcast.
I think you might have been a little too loose with your critiques in the past.
You think I'm the one critiquing the Beefer book? I've ruined. That's why our invite got lost in the mail.
Possibly.
So you like the Beefer book, then, is what you're saying?
I didn't say that. All I said was you were a little loose with your critique.
All I'm saying is we've had the Young Bucks on the show. We've had Drew Gulak. We've had Tony Schiavone. We've had all these people, and we still don't get an invite to the wrestling book Zoom thing.
Yeah, I mean,
we should have hosted. I guess we could have, hosted the wrestling book Zoom thing. I mean, it sounds like Kenny just had an idea, and it was during COVID, so everyone was like, "Yeah, I'm sitting around at home. I'll go on Zoom. Like, I don't care."
I mean, is that not the most COVID thing you ever heard?
Oh, it's the early stages where everyone's like, "I guess we'll just go on Zoom and I'll talk for like 2 hours," and it's like, I love my friends. I don't want to talk to them for 2 hours straight on a video call. No, thank you.
No, but it seemed. I'm glad Keith got invited, at least, because he is a wrestling author and writer. So, I'm glad that Kenny recognized Keith's contribution to the club, I guess.
Yeah, and I think DDP was there too, who has been big time us as well. A lot of people were there, and we were not. But that's okay. I'm not bitter about it. It's just a thing that happened, I
mean, the fact that we didn't know about it probably speaks volumes as to.
It is pretty bad that we were both unaware that it happened in the first place. Like, I don't know how that slipped our. Like, we're on social media. Like, you think we would have heard about this somewhere? Like, truly blew my mind when I read about that.
Must have just deleted Twitter for like 6 months while they were promoting this.
It's so weird. Well, if there's another one and you're listening and you get invited, please tell us. We want to go. Like, if Kenny Casanova, if you happen to listen to this, please invite us. We'll settle any beef we got.
Yeah. We don't have merch to sell.
No, we can make some. We can go on TeePublic.
Just general awareness of the podcast and our love for reading about wrestling.
I think we would both wear a tank top with our logo on it, right?
I mean, I would if we had them.
Yeah.
We don't, so.
I'm just thinking. I mean, that's about the markiest thing you could possibly do. But we should be marks for ourselves. I would definitely go down that path.
You read in the book at some point, Scott Hall made $40,000 a year in merchandising alone. I'm like, it's really good, actually.
Yeah. I like that he says, too, at the end, he's like, I'm still getting merch for Razor and for Scott Hall, which is like, damn, I mean, rest in peace now. But his family's hopefully getting the merch now, the deal. Like, it's crazy that how much money they make off T-shirt sales in their 50s. Like, Stone Cold. Think what Stone Cold must still make from, Austin 316 shirts.
Hogan's still buying mansions on NWO and Hollywood, or in regular Hulkamania.
Did Hogan buy a mansion?
I'm sure he has. Just from merchandise.
My boy Terry.
Yeah. It all comes full circle.
So, well, I think we can both say that Follow the Buzzards, even though we know Keith very well, and obviously this is no surprise to anyone listening, we can both say this is a treat, right?
Yeah, this is the most. This review is partially subjective, but objectively, it's definitely a treat. So I feel good about touting that and saying that loudly.
Yeah, and if you bought it on Amazon, go give him reviews. He's only got 4 ratings at the time of this recording, and I know he only had, I think, 1 when we recorded before and it was bad. Now he's got 4 and they're middling, so we really need to buff him back up. Like, we need to go on there and say this is a great book. So if you bought it on Amazon, please go give Keith a good review. He deserves it.
Yeah, give him the 5 stars that will offset the 2-star review that he got early on.
If you're interested, Follow the Buzzards is available everywhere books are. Keith is great, and I'm sure Walt, we will have him back. I'm sure you'll watch wrestling with him very soon. I love that you guys have a wrestling bar in New York now. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, probably trying to do it next week.
Yeah, there you go. So the day of this episode comes out, you may be hanging out with Keith.
He's still getting booked on podcasts though, so Also, too, we were supposed. I stupidly, I was supposed to hang out with him and watch wrestling this week, but then forgot that Dynamite was moved to Tuesday, so
Oh,
I should probably keep track of the baseball playoffs and how that and NBA and how that impacts my ability to watch wrestling with Keith.
That's a good plan.
Sorry, Keith.
I'm sure he'll forgive you. We put him on the show. I'm sure we sold a couple books for him. So
yeah.
Yep. So if you don't have it, go buy it. Keith's the best friend of our show, and his books are great, and Follow the Buzzards right in line with all that. So give that a buy. And if you want more Awesome Truth, if you want to hear Keith talk, he's on a bunch of episodes. They're all available in our archives at awesometruth.libsyn.com. You can also subscribe to us and get all of our new episodes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, any podcast app you have, we are there. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AwesomeTruthPod. Walt, great to talk about Follow the Buzzards with you. Great to talk wrestling books. And I don't know what we're doing the rest of the year, but we'll hopefully pull some surprises out of our. I think this is the last big release, right? We might have a surprise. I guess we're in the process of hopefully booking a surprise. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but
which probably means we'll just find something on Peacock and talk about.
Keep listening because maybe you'll really enjoy it. But at the very least, we will create content for you. We can promise you that much.
Yep.
That's our solemn swear to you all.
Yeah. Just like wrestling during COVID, there is no week off.
No, there's a week off every week, but then we're back.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
I think it makes sense. Thank you all so much for listening, and remember, the truth will set you free.